We were all chilling over at my house when my friend Corey suddenly came up with this stupid idea. Have you guys ever heard of the elevator game? It's some other stupid ritual of yours, isn't it? Ethan chimed in. No, trust me guys, it'll be fun, Corey insisted. After some further discussion, Corey managed to convince both of us. We decided to do the game as a group. I realized that we broke one of the most important rules. At the time, it didn't seem like such a big deal. We had also found the perfect place to do the ritual. The building was exactly 10 stories and it had one elevator. It was almost like the building was built for the ritual. I assume that most of you guys know what the ritual is, but if you have no idea what we're talking about, you can read more about it here. The plan was simple. Wait until our parents were asleep, get out the back door and meet at the hotel. Everyone was expected to arrive by 12 a.m. Then we would do the ritual and go back home. It was easier said than done. I rolled and rolled around in bed, listening to the howling wind. It was raining heavily. I texted on our group chat to call it off, but Corey was adamant on doing it tonight. I sighed and checked my watch. 11:33. I slowly tiptoed out of my room and stood outside my parents' room. I put my ears against the door and heard them both snoring. They were fast asleep. I went back to my room and started making preparations. I put on my hoodie and grabbed my phone. I checked my battery. 74%. That was more than enough to last me through the night. I slowly tiptoed out of the back door and exited carefully. I snuck up to the front door wearing just my socks and then got my joggers and wore them quickly. The night was dark and enveloping. Chills ran up my spine and I got extreme anxiety. I felt vulnerable and unsafe being outside at this hour. I quickly went back inside to the house and grabbed a small knife and pocketed it. If someone jumped at me, at least I'd have something to defend myself with. I also grabbed a separate flashlight from the garage, not wanting to rely on my phone's flashlight. Finally, I walked outside and started running down the street. My heart thumped against my chest and I shivered from the cold breeze. The night was cloudy and extremely dark. The dim streetlights were my only guide. Luckily, I came across no one and made it to the hotel safely. Thinking back, that in itself was such a stupid risk I had taken. It would have costed me nothing to not have done this stupid ritual. Sure enough, Corey and Ethan were both there waiting for me. "Oh, I thought you pussied out," Corey said with a smirk. Before I could reply, however, he already started walking towards the hotel to get inside. As we'd expected, the reception lady gave us a questioning stare. Corey started walking towards her to make up some excuse for coming to the hotel at this hour, but Ethan held him back and gave him a "just get on with it" look. We continued moving past the receptionist to the elevators. There were 2 old elevators there. I made a note of which elevator we were taking and stepped in, followed by Corey and Ethan. Corey pressed the buttons in the 4262 10-5 order, and the elevator started ascending. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I got that feeling of dread in my stomach. Every instinct screamed at me to get out of that elevator, but I stayed glued in there. The elevator moved pretty slow and creaked like it was about to fall. Judging from the looks on Corey and Ethan's faces, they felt the same way as me. Both looked nervous and pale under the dim lighting of the elevator. No one talked and we waited silently for the elevator to finish on the 5th floor. You think it worked?" Ethan spoke in a stutter. He was clearly nervous. Corey gave him a slow nod as the elevator stopped on the 5th floor. I was about to say something, but was cut short when a woman walked into the elevator. She was wearing a black coat and was very tall. My heart immediately started to beat faster as I realized that the ritual was going exactly as it was supposed to. Looking over at Corey and Ethan, they were equally petrified. Corey pressed a button for the 1st floor and the elevator started ascending instead. My fear reached a fever pitch and I nearly lost my balance as the elevator flew upwards. I could feel the mysterious woman staring at me. It made my skin crawl. I desperately wanted to run away from the elevator as soon as it got to the 10th floor.
"Where are you guys going?"
The woman asked in a sweet but artificial voice. It sounded like she was trying to imitate a human voice. Ethan and I looked at Corey and he shook his head, signaling for us to ignore her.
"Where are you guys going?"
she prompted again.
"Where are you guys going?"
Her voice grew more and more frenzied and demonic. My heart was thudding in my chest and I started feeling lightheaded. Then the woman touched my shoulder. Her grip was so cold. It sent a freezing cold through my whole body and my veins turned into ice. It felt worse than pain itself. I let out a yelp just as the doors opened to the 10th floor. Corey, Ethan, and I ran. The hallway was dark and endless. It still looked like we were in the hotel, just that all the lights were off. We all huddled together in the dark hallway, our ragged breaths being the only sound. "Let's get out of here," Ethan said. He was clearly the most disturbed out of all of us. We heard a low growl coming from the other end of the hallway. We didn't need to be told twice, and we started running back towards the elevator. The elevator doors were open and welcoming. We ran and ran, but never got closer to the elevator. It was like we were on a treadmill. The elevator doors then started closing, and we ran even faster. Corey and Ethan made it to the elevator and went inside before the door shut. The last thing I saw was their worried and scared faces as the doors shut right on me, as I was left in this hellish world. I pressed the elevator button again and again, but it didn't work anymore. I instinctively reached for my phone to message them and ask them for help, but my messages didn't work. Surprisingly, my mobile data seemed to work only on some apps. I can access anything as long as I only view it. I can still look through social media. It doesn't even allow me to like posts. I found the subreddit after hours of searching, and it looks like I can post here. This subreddit may have a link to this world, who knows. No sleep, you are my last hope. Please, help me. I banged and abused the elevator doors, but they wouldn't budge open. This was my 5th try in 2 hours of trying to get the elevator doors open. I wiped my sweat from my brows and checked my watch for the time back in my world. Mom and Dad must be so worried, I thought, as I got myself ready for another shoulder rush into the elevator doors. I braced myself for the pain as I ran top speed towards the elevator. I bounced right off the elevator doors as pain exploded in my shoulder. Even holding it for 5 minutes, a dull throb of pain still lingered, warning me not to do it again. At this rate, I would break my shoulder bone. I glanced out the hotel window and stared at the purplish reddish sky for the 5th time today. It was like someone had poured and mixed red and purple water paints together and then left them to blend. A red plus sign was burnt right into the middle of it. It was an angry red color, and it took place of the sun in this world. I took my phone out of my pocket to check the battery. Still 72%. My phone battery was either not running out here, or it was running out at a very slow rate. Things work differently in this world. Even my mobile data worked, but it's just a bit different. I also found that my phone camera always captured a black image and never took actual photos. My torch also seemed to have a never-ending battery. Even my own body worked differently. I didn't get hungry or thirsty, and nor did I feel the urge to go to the toilet. It was like everything was infinite in this world. Whatever state I came in, I would stay that way until I got out. I scrolled through helpful comments you guys gave me on my last post and decided to do something productive for once, rather than launching myself to the elevator doors. It was time to hunt for resources and try to explore these rooms in the hallway. I cautiously moved down the hallway and examined each of the doors leading to the rooms. I picked the first one to my left and reached for the doorknob. As soon as I touched the doorknob, I noticed it was freezing cold. I quickly pulled my hand away in shock. The cold lingered on my fingers. I put my ear as close as I could to the door and heard whispers. They were loud enough for me to hear, but still very faint. Thus, I couldn't understand them. I got a bad feeling from that door, and so I left it. The whispers lingered in my head for a short time. I switched on my torch again so I could see in the dark hallway. The only light in the hallway was from the sky outside, and even that couldn't penetrate the darkness. The darkness was thicker here. My torch could barely light up the path. It was like using a torch in the fog, not very effective. Still, it couldn't compare to the very end of the hallway. The end of the hallway was deep black. I couldn't see what was there, and even my torch couldn't illuminate it. When I walked there, the temperature dropped the further I went in. My instincts kept telling me to go back. I couldn't make it 10 steps into the end of the hallway. Whatever was at the end of the hallway wasn't nice. I moved to the second door on the left and reached for that doorknob. Suddenly the door creaked open inwards before I even touched the knob. I strained my eyes to see through the tiny crack of the door, but all I saw was a normal hotel room. The lights were on as well. It was quite welcoming. I was about to step in when I heard very faint breathing on the other side of the door. I jerked away and closed the door quickly. I immediately felt unsafe, knowing that even if I did have things to barricade the door with, I couldn't because it opened inwards. I moved to the third door on the left and once again reached for the doorknob when I realized it didn't have a doorknob. The place of the doorknob was a small plus sign shaped hole. I bent over and tried to see through the hole. I saw a normal, well-lit hotel room once again. The room seemed fine and I couldn't even hear any breathing, but I didn't want to risk it. I left the room alone and walked back to the start of the hallway. It was time to try the doors on the right side. The first room on the right had a red door. It was unique compared to all the other wooden doors. The door had engravings of weird animals and monsters on it. The door gave me bad feelings, and so I left it alone. I moved to the second door on the right and reached for the doorknob. I twisted it and opened the door slowly. The hotel room was dark and the curtains were drawn. I took a risk and stepped into the room. I waited for something to jump onto me and finish me, but nothing happened. I ran to the curtains and ripped them open to let some light into the room. As soon as I pulled away the curtains, the room lit up more than expected. It was like I turned on every light in the room. The darkness retreated to the corners of the room. I looked around and there was a king-size bed in the middle of the room with a bedside table on either side. I quickly searched the drawers and found the following items: a plus sign shaped key, a knife with a tint red blade and a plus sign in the handle, a small journal with nonsense letters scribbled on every page. Some pages did have diagrams, I'll study them later. A purplish reddish ball about the size of my fist. It was firm but also soft in texture. The rest of the room was pretty barren. I suddenly got an idea. I placed all the items I found in one of the drawers and decided to make this room somewhat of a base for me. It seemed to be a normal room, and it had a door I could barricade with furniture. It was much safer than being out in the hallway. I grabbed the red knife I found and took it with me to explore the remaining 2 rooms left on the right side of the hallway. I felt secure with it, and it definitely felt like a weapon intended to be used in this world. The other knife that I brought with me from home didn't seem to be able to cut anything here apart from myself. I moved to the third door on the right and heard talking on the other side of the door. They were speaking some weird language that I couldn't even transcribe. The syllables are very different to what we speak, and I don't think a human can even recreate those sounds. There were 2 voices, and they were arguing, judging on the tones of their voices. The conversation played out again and again. I backed away from the door and continued down the hallway. The 4th door on the right was locked. There was no keyhole I could find anywhere, and the door wouldn't budge when I tried to push it. I felt exhausted after I'd returned back to my room. Yes, it's mine now. I lay down on the soft bed and started typing this post. I don't know what to do anymore, guys. What should I do? Please, help me out. After posting the last post, I decided to do a bit more exploring. I held the new red knife that I found and also took the plus-shaped key with me. I moved to the third door on the left, which had a plus-shaped keyhole. I inserted the key into the keyhole cautiously and slowly turned it to the right. I heard the door click open and slowly opened the door and stepped inside the hotel room. I held my knife in front of me. The room had an antique vibe to it. There were candles set around the room, and the whole room was in shades of red. The wood in the middle of the bed was brownish red. The walls were whitish red. The carpet was crimson red. The blankets and bed sheets were red too. The room felt warm. The only light sources in the room were the candles placed around the room and also a big crystal chandelier that also held candles. The candles seemed to never blow out or melt. The room was lit in most areas, yet the candles created shadows in the corners of the rooms. I felt as if I had stepped into the same room as in the Middle Ages. I cautiously walked around the room and reached for the side tables on either side of the king-sized bed. Faint whispers I couldn't even make out filled my head. I stepped back quickly. The whispers didn't dissipate. They didn't come from anywhere in particular, they were just inside my head. The most unnerving thing about them was that I couldn't even make out a single word. The whispers seemed to be in English, due to the faint syllables that I could hear. It was different from the whispers I had heard earlier. I steeled myself and stepped back into the room. The whispers increased, and it felt like my head was filled with static. like I was listening to hundreds of people whispering at the same time. It was driving me to the breaking point, but I continued to walk into the room. I opened the first drawer on the side table and found a red feather inside. I picked it up thinking it would be useful. My vision started to get blurry and I couldn't think straight because of the whispers. I just shouted, "Stop!" at the top of my voice. Everything went silent. The silence was euphoric, but it only lasted a few moments. I heard a low growl from outside in the hallway. I quickly ran to the door as I had left it open. I just closed it when suddenly I saw the creature that the roar belonged to. The creature was devoid of color. It had no color. I can't even describe it. The creature was the color of deep space. But even space has a color. It was the total absence of light. It had pulsating skin that absorbed all light that hit it. To my eyes, it seemed like a humanoid-shaped black spot. A total absence of matter. Kind of like a black hole. I was startled by its appearance and was a bit late in closing the door. It managed to put one of its limbs through the door just before I closed it shut. I tried to crush the creature's limbs with the door, but it felt like trying to crush concrete. I jabbed at the creature's limbs with the red knife I had found. The creature then howled. It was a unique sound, one that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Thick black liquid oozed out of the creature's hands, although I couldn't see the cuts I had made. The creature pulled its arm out of the door gap, and I quickly shut the door. I locked it with the plus-shaped key and moved the chair in front of it. The creature continued to howl. I covered my ears with my hands to block out the migraine-inducing sound, but I could still hear it. I heard it go further and further away until the howls were only a faint whisper. Immediately, the whisper started up again in my head, and I knew I had to get out of this room. I took the feather I had found with me, and also picked up a red handbag I had found on one of the couches to store all my stuff in. I held out my knife in front of me and stepped towards the door to venture out into the hallway again, when I noticed the window in the room. The window was wide open. The reddish-purplish sky matched with the tone of the room so well that I nearly didn't see it. Unlike every window in this place, the window wasn't sealed shut. I looked out the window and noticed that I was on ground level. I moved back from the window and the world I saw outside the window changed faster than the blink of an eye. Once again I saw the sky and it signified that I was at least 10 stories up. I moved closer to the window and looked out, and once again I was on ground level. I could easily climb out of the window and get out of this building. At least that's what it seemed like. I knew it was impossible that the room was on ground level. After all, every other window that I had looked out of showed that I was very high up. But this open window showed the complete opposite. I decided to test the window before I jumped out of it. I picked the red feather as it seemed like the most useless of all the items I had gathered, and dropped it out the window. It landed on the ground and didn't fall down 10 stories, just like my eyes showed me. But then, why does it look like I'm high up when I look at the window from far away? I chalked it up to the general weirdness of this world. Nothing works the same here. Maybe it's possible for this to occur here. Or maybe my eyes are just fooling me. Maybe I'm not seeing things right. After all, the human eye isn't really adapted to seeing in this world. That would also explain why I couldn't see the color of the creature, just like we can't see much of the electromagnetic spectrum. Maybe we can't see matter in this world correctly. This could also explain why the hallway is so dark at the end, why my torch can't illuminate the hallway. The window is my only way of escaping this building and redoing the elevator ritual. Perhaps it'll take me back to Earth. Is the window a risk worth taking? I read all your comments from my last post and saw that pretty much everyone was telling me not to leave from the window. However, I believe that it is my only exit. Nonetheless, I looked around the hallways and the 3 rooms that I could access, and after thinking over it for a long time, I decided that I needed to get out that window. I armed myself with the red knife that I found, and also took the journal that I found in the bedroom with me. It may come in handy. I put my leg over the leg of the window and felt the ground. Yes, the ground was there. I quickly then swung my whole body over the window and was outside for what felt like the first time in weeks. I could now see the rest of the demented dimension. The city was just like it was back in our reality, except the buildings were run down and dark. The sky was the same purplish, reddish, rich color, and the red cross took the place of the sun. The place was rather dark, like a dim room. Suddenly, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I had a strong feeling that something was looking at me. I looked around and noticed them. From the windows of the rundown buildings, the beings of this dimension were staring at me. They had a humanoid shape, but all their body parts were in wrong proportions. Their eyes were bright red and shone like lighthouses from behind those dark windows. I didn't give them any more time to stare at me, and quickly started running back towards the entrance of the building. I heard the beings all howl as they jumped out of their windows and started chasing me. I didn't look back. I quickly entered the building and made it for the elevators. The doors were wide open, and I quickly rushed into the elevator and punched a button in the 426210-5 order. I watched the monsters come in. The doors closed a split second before the monsters came in. I prayed to God that I will return to my world. I held my breath as the elevator made it back to the ground floor, and the elevator doors opened. I nearly jumped when I saw Corey and Ethan grinning at me. "We thought you got stuck. Come on, we have to get home. That was boring," they said as they pulled me along with them. For the past few weeks or so, everything seems different. There are small changes everywhere that are driving me crazy. Sometimes, just as I'm falling asleep, I can see shadows moving in my peripheral vision. Have I returned?